Our story begins in a new season, a new semester at school, and a boy nervous about his first day of class. And by luck, or not, he ended up sitting next to the most famous and dangerous girl in his class. Perhaps the most exotic that ever existed, with porcelain skin, red eyes, and this whole combination exuding danger. He only knew her from rumors, but now seeing her up close, she truly seemed peculiar to him. And almost letting a tear fall, Kuroki, our protagonist, was sure they were very different. He always heard gossip about her, and when he had the chance, he paid attention to the news involving Chihara-san. That name never left the mouths of the boys at school when they were gathered and gossiping, and the most diverse theories turned the girl into something almost supernatural. Kuroki was amazed at how much they talked about Mei Chihara, and watching her there beside him, our boy couldn't imagine himself talking to her. When suddenly she looked in his direction, and the boy, of course, trembled to his core. Kuroki looked away, but realizing she was staring, imagined the girl didn't like him analyzing her. He was extremely uncomfortable because from the corner of his eye, he knew she wouldn't stop staring at him. With eyes wide open, Kuroki just wanted to understand why she was doing that. It was embarrassing the way she stared, so he wondered if the girl had gotten mad because he had looked at her. Kuroki felt as if an arrow had pierced his thoughts, and there he was, unable to do anything. But she didn't back down, as if she could read in his expressions how useless he thought he was. Realizing he had to do something, the boy looked back at Chihara, thinking about apologizing, and the girl had already turned her chair toward him. Kuroki trembled just seeing her in that position, not blinking as if she were a robot or something like that. And not knowing what to do, our boy just hoped she wouldn't put an end to his existence. Then, gathering courage, he managed to say the girl's name with a questioning tone, trying to understand what she wanted after all. But she had gotten up and was walking toward him. Kuroki couldn't help but fix his attention on the girl's obstacles as she approached. However, the greater obstacle was trying to hide it when she did nothing but stare at him. Kuroki trembled from head to toe. It was a path of no return, and he kept searching his mind for excuses for not having avoided looking where he shouldn't. Everything was spinning for the boy who didn't know where to hide his face due to the situation being out of control. He started looking for the hidden camera because it felt like a prank or some kind of school joke, and he remembered the guys talking about how Chihara noticed people, and he was almost sure that the way she was behaving, she was noticing him at that very moment. Many thoughts overwhelmed poor Kuroki, and if he could, he would grab someone's hand just to cry together. Chihara's eyes were intense and at the same time curious, and I believe we'll talk a lot about them throughout the story. Kuroki then noticed that now, besides staring at him, the girl had raised her arms toward him, and as if she were going to attack, she pulled his neck closer, as if to bite him. But Chihara only whispered in the boy's ear that she would like to see his notebook. Kuroki handed his math notebook to Chihara and didn't forget to mention that she was way too close, and the girl, processing the information, went back to her seat, thankful. Kuroki seemed to be in shock, and he realized he was soaked in sweat. But the girl had gotten too close, and with all the rumors, Kuroki didn't know if she was really dangerous. Then she extended her hand to give something to our protagonist, and with a cute smile, she said it was a thank you gift. Kuroki didn't understand but thanked her for the Japanese history book. That's when the teacher's voice echoed in the classroom and everything went back to normal. But there beside Chihara, things had changed for Kuroki. Then, while he remained absorbed, the teacher asked the boy to solve a problem from the lesson, but he didn't seem to be in any condition to answer, because the girl next to him was sleeping with her eyes open, and that scared him. Kuroki couldn't concentrate on the lesson and spent the whole time observing Chihara's behavior, and he found it quite strange when she kept looking at her own wrist. Chihara focused on her wrist with pleasure, and that was the second time Kuroki saw her smile. Kuroki realized that the other girls in the class thought that was bizarre, and to them it was as if Chihara had a certain fondness for blood, which made them frightened. Meanwhile, Kuroki remained beside the girl, thinking it was easy to imagine this behavior coming from Chihara, and thus he became intrigued. After class, our protagonist was walking through the school hallway with the expression of someone who had been haunted by a ghost. Then someone appeared in front of him with something suggestive in their hands. He stared at the person, trying to mumble something while cold sweat trickled down his forehead. And gathering the necessary strength, he finished saying Chihara's name, who was staring at him with her red and mysterious eyes. In front of him, the girl extended her hand holding a pack of gum. And Kuroki was thoughtful, trying to understand what the girl wanted with that. Then he realized that she was simply offering him a piece of the candy. Confused, the boy asked if that gum was for him, while the girl kept her hand extended without saying anything. Chihara stared at him as if in a trance and suddenly began chewing a piece of the gum. Kuroki, with his dead fish expression, watched her chew the gum and understood that she was offering it to him. Faced with the situation, a thought struck the boy like lightning. With her standing there in front of him, he concluded that accepting the gum would be like kissing her indirectly, and even feeling grossed out by the situation, something inside him made him happy because it would be his first time. So not to seem rude, Kuroki decided to accept a piece of the gum. Chihara watched the boy chew the candy as if it were something new. After a brief silence, Kuroki tried to start a conversation instead that he used to chew a gum like that, but smaller. And Chihara, in a creepy way, started smiling at the boy. She then decided to give him the entire pack of gum and turned to leave, but Kuroki called her name. The girl turned around saying the boy's name as if learning a new word and said goodbye naturally. Kuroki also said goodbye and kept reflecting on how interesting she was. Chihara's hands were writing something with a marker, and when the bell rang, we saw that she was focused on her own notes. Her wrist was like a task planner, and the auction to get along with the boy beside her seemed to have been successfully completed. After class, Kuroki was in the bathroom washing his hands, and in front of the mirror, he realized that his first day had started so differently, it didn't even feel real. Because he had always been afraid of popular people, thinking they always hated him. And when he left the bathroom thinking about Chihara, the girl in question was sitting outside as if waiting for him. With trembling words, Kuroki asked if the girl had a problem, but she simply replied that she had seen Kuroki and suggested the two of them could walk home together. And Kuroki found it quite strange that the girl had waited for him in front of the boy's bathroom. They stared at each other while Chihara waited for a response, and she seemed a bit anxious because he wasn't saying anything. But in reality, the boy just had a slow thought process, and to confirm, he asked if she really wanted to go home with him. Not believing it, he asked again if she truly wanted to go with him, and Chihara didn't seem to understand what was so absurd about it. So after thinking about various possibilities that popped into his mind, Kuroki wanted to know why she would do such an atrocity. But the girl widened her eyes, speechless at the boy's reaction, and decided to go alone, imagining she had just been rejected. However, Kuroki, who only acted after a push, asked her to wait and followed her. The girl looked back and answered yes when asked if she was also going home by train. And with his hand on Chihara's backpack, our protagonist informed that he was too, and blushed as he accompanied her to the station. Chihara suddenly stopped and opened her mouth as if she had experienced a system failure. Seeing that, Kuroki wondered if she hadn't felt relieved. Then the girl brought her hand to her ear and slowly began to stabilize. And as if nothing had happened, she looked at Kuroki and signaled for them to continue walking. The two walked side by side, and our protagonist figured that maybe she wasn't so scary after all. And he remembered how she seemed harmless while waiting for him outside the bathroom door. The two reached the bike parking area, and hesitantly, Kuroki asked if the girl rode a bike. But she didn't seem to understand what he meant. So he explained that some people rode their bikes to the station, and Chihara looked at him curiously, as if that was something new to her. But she quickly replied that she didn't ride a bike, and that excited Kuroki, who also didn't have that skill. The boy was startled by his own spontaneity, thinking he had acted as if they were close friends, and Chihara blushed as if she could read his thoughts. And as if lightning had struck his head again, Kuroki kept walking beside her, concluding aloud to himself that the girl didn't know how to ride a bike. They were walking home, but the silence hanging between them was deafening. Kuroki searched for words but couldn't find anything worthy of saying. Chihara continued on her path, and the boy tried to break the silence by calling out to her for a moment. Then he noticed the girl squinting her eyes as if something was bothering her. Kuroki couldn't figure out why Chihara's expression looked that way, and a bit shy, he assumed she was super angry. Feeling his stomach twist with fear, Kuroki nearly soiled his pants trying to make contact with the girl, who said nothing. He tried one last time, but Chihara seemed focused on another spot on the street. The girl pointed in a direction as if she had seen something interesting, and Kuroki tried to follow her gaze. In a rather peculiar way with her cyclops-like eyes, she informed him that she saw a big cat pom-pom. Kuroki, who was looking in the same direction, couldn't see the same thing. The boy only saw a pastry shop with two decorative objects outside the store, and Chihara insisted that she saw two cats stacked like good friends, which worried Kuroki. The boy then asked if her eyes were okay, judging by the contact lenses she wore, but remembered that type of lens didn't have prescription. So Kuroki decided to lend his glasses to Chihara in order to show her they weren't cats. Chihara put the glasses over her red eyes, and Kuroki waited for her conclusion. She then realized what it actually was and removed the glasses, thanking him. The girl started acting strange as if she had entered a trance, and Kuroki noticed she was blushing. And to ease the tension, Kuroki said he also had trouble seeing the objects at first. Chihara chose not to dwell on the subject and asked the boy to forget what had happened, and so he apologized. She began walking as if her head was frying, and Kuroki just watched her. As she walked, our boy thought Chihara looked very cute. But to avoid temptation, he slapped his own cheeks to break the spell. They kept walking, and to spark conversation again, Kuroki asked if she liked cats, but the girl definitely didn't want to talk about that anymore. Kuroki couldn't help but notice how attractive she looked with glasses, and the image of her wearing them messed with his dignity. They arrived at the station, and it was time to part ways as each would take a different line, so they decided to say goodbye. But before that, Chihara dove into her bag and asked him to wait a moment. She took a marker from her bag and asked Kuroki to extend his arm. The boy was confused but obeyed his mysterious muse without objection. The girl wrote on Kuroki's forearm her chat ID, which curiously was lovecat_May. And quite directly, Chihara said she'd like to talk to Kuroki outside of school too. They then said goodbye, and our protagonist seemed quite happy and convinced that she really liked cats. But suddenly something overtook his thoughts, which in fact was something new. He had just gotten a girl's contact, and passing through the station turnstile, he realized it wasn't just any contact, it was Chihara-san's. That kept echoing in his mind all the way home like a scratched record. And when he opened the front door, even with his blank expression, he told his mom he got Chihara-san's contact, and the woman congratulated him. A pair of shoes echoed down the school hallway, and a girl sucking on a lollipop seemed to be waiting in ambush. Chihara was walking when suddenly someone bold had found her. Mei Chihara felt the weight on her back, and a blonde girl grabbed her from behind, smiling and asking what she was doing. The radiant-eyed blonde then invited Chihara into her classroom as if they were old friends. This was Chinatsu Iwakura, who, showing great familiarity, painted our girl's nails because she thought they were too dull. Chihara tried to hold back laughter because of the tickles, but Iwakura didn't care and only thought about how the black nail polish suited her friend. Chinatsu was the talkative and very enthusiastic type, and she said her new boyfriend loved her a lot. She started going on about her love life while Chihara paid more attention to the tickles she felt on her cheek. Quite flushed, Chinatsu revealed that her boyfriend didn't find her annoying, and that seemed like a relief for the girl who couldn't stop listing her great catch's virtues. With a sparkle in her eyes, Chinatsu felt very grateful that Chihara was always willing to listen to her, and that was a good reason to declare that she loved her friend. Suddenly, Chihara's mouth started bleeding from biting her cheeks so hard to hold back the tickles, and Chinatsu noticed. But checking if all the nails were painted seemed more important, so she asked if she could take some pictures of Chihara's nails, and the girl didn't mind. Chihara remained frozen, and her eager friend sent the photos to her boyfriend, who was an exemplary guy for always replying quickly to her messages. And to prove it, she showed her friend the evidence with her phone in hand. Chinatsu stared at the screen as if her life depended on it, and it only took 7 seconds for the message to be marked as read. Then with pride and relief, she smiled as she showed Chihara how fast he was. It was clear from Chihara's look that something wasn't quite clear to her, so she decided to ask her friend a question. The girl paid attention as Chihara, with her mysterious gaze, asked why she had sent the message. Very patiently, Chinatsu replied that they both liked to share what they were doing, so it became clear to her that sending messages brought people closer. Chinatsu looked at her friend for a moment and smiled, confirming she was happy that she understood. Then curious, the girl wanted to know if Chihara was trying to get close to someone, and like 2 headlights, her eyes agreed in response. Amazed, the friend expressed how cute she thought Chihara was, and she decided to give her a makeover like a little doll while Chihara just watched silently. So Chinatsu continued excitedly, telling her friend not to worry, and like a robot, she agreed with everything. Kuroki was sitting on the couch thinking about watching a movie before bed when suddenly his phone rang. He looked at the device in shock. It was a notification from Chihara-san. And when he opened the message, he saw that the girl had sent a picture of a bowl of udon. Kuroki pondered what to reply and decided to tell her that he had eaten fried mackerel for dinner. The boy got nervous, wondering if he had done the right thing. Jumping on the couch, he couldn't hide his anxiety until his phone rang again. Then, when he opened the chat, he saw that she had replied with a cat sticker, and for the boy, that seemed like a okay. Still looking at his phone, Kuroki found it funny that someone as mysterious as Chihara ate udon, but deep down, he scolded himself for thinking that way. And on the other side, the girl stared at her phone confused as if something had stunned her, until someone called her to take a bath. Kuroki was on his way to school and he noticed 2 guys talking about Chihara, which had become more than natural to him. And thoughtfully, our boy even agreed with them, considering the behavior she usually showed. However, what most intrigued Kuroki was that Chihara didn't care about the rumors and didn't give any attention to the speculation about her. So kind of gossiping behind the boys, he decided to join the conversation. As if he were someone special, he simply said he didn't think Chihara was as evil as people judged her to be, and he passed by the guys boasting that he wasn't afraid of the mysterious girl. Little did Kuroki know that they were only talking about seeing Chihara fall off a bike while practicing. Curious, the guys followed Kuroki and called him over to talk. They seemed interested in knowing what kind of relationship our protagonist had with the dark girl. And they concluded that Kuroki barely talked to anyone and found it strange that he spoke up just when they were talking about Chihara. One of the boys was practically wide-eyed with curiosity to know what the 2 were doing behind the scenes, as if she had turned Kuroki into a vampire. Kuroki started recalling his moments with Chihara and thought there wouldn't be a problem in telling them that the girl had given him gum. But in a bizarre twist, the boy revealed that she had given him a razor blade. And the guys immediately imagined that Kuroki had been initiated into some ninja organization or something like that. To top it off, our naive protagonist, still smiling, mentioned that it was very nice and nostalgic. They were desperate trying to understand what the 2 were doing together, because despite sitting close, they were very different, and Kuroki agreed with that. It was obvious to everyone in class that Kuroki was an extremely normal boy, while Chihara exuded that dangerous air. But our boy knew that despite the bad impressions, people didn't know the other side of the girl, and he felt that he couldn't just say what he thought about the way he saw her. So he tried to say something that wouldn't compromise her and decided to reveal to the boys that Chihara liked pom-poms, but he wasn't specific that they were cat pom-poms. With vivid imaginations, the boys started wondering how this combination of blades and pom-poms played into Kuroki and Chihara's relationship. Realizing that the boys were super excited about his stories, Kuroki decided to tell them that she also wrote on his body with a marker. and naturally, they imagined this scene in the most bizarre way possible. Completing his narrative, Kuroki informed them that it was after serving as a notepad that he discovered how much Chihara liked cats. So it was hard for the boys to start their day with the information that Kuroki had his body marked with the phrase, "I love kittens," because for them that was as impactful as a planetary alignment or even a solar flare. Kuroki had talked so much that he was startled to see the expression on the boys' faces. They were so bewildered by the information that they were at a loss for words, and so they decided it was better not to ask anything else about the subject. Kuroki felt embarrassed because the truth is that our boy was a terrible storyteller. Then, thinking about Chihara, the boy realized that he had nothing to give in return for the gum he had received. He walked through the school hallway wondering if she might find such an action gross, but he didn't want to ignore the girl's kindness. So he went to look for her in the classroom next door, where she usually went during break time. Chinatsu was in the room and looked curiously at Kuroki. Very helpful, she asked if the boy was looking for someone, and she was a bit incredulous when Kuroki replied that he'd like to talk to Chihara. The girl then informed him that Chihara was in the infirmary due to a headache, so Kuroki thanked her and left. Chinatsu walked to the classroom door as the boy left and judged him for acting like a grade schooler. In the infirmary, Chihara-san was resting with an ice pack on her head, which hurt terribly from the fall she took on the bike. In the infirmary and groaning in pain, our protagonist was being treated for a wound on his forehead that looked injured. After dressing Kuroki's wound, the nurse informed him that he would be fine despite having lost a lot of blood, and the boy thanked her for her kindness. She also warned him to see a doctor if he didn't feel well, and the boy inspected his wound, trying to understand how it had happened. He had been walking to the classroom as usual, when suddenly he collided with the shoulder of a giant from the judo club, and he felt his body thrown against the window, shattering the glass, and also his head. He was then carried by the giant student to the infirmary. Very considerate, the judo guy even apologized and gave his card to Kuroki in case he needed anything, maybe a new head. The nurse decided to take the medical note to the next class's teacher, and Kuroki figured he could do it himself. However, the woman decided that he needed to rest because he was dizzy, and the boy ended up agreeing. He stayed there sitting on the infirmary couch just existing when a noise came from beside him. Kuroki was worried about the next class and didn't notice Chihara silently slipping through the curtains. Suddenly, he looked at the curtains, which quickly closed as if they had never been moved. Kuroki turned to the opposite side, and Chihara appeared from between the curtains again. The boy stood up suddenly and stood still in front of the couch, feeling that someone else inhabited the room. Kuroki grew suspicious of the curtain and looked back in that direction. But since he saw nothing, he closed his eyes and sighed in relief, unaware that Chihara was secretly watching him. Then he felt Chihara's cold whisper in his ear, asking where he had gotten hurt. Kuroki, who hadn't noticed the girl's presence, trembled like a church bell on Sunday. Little by little, he recovered and greeted the girl behind him as if she were a ghost. Kuroki told her he had hit his head when she asked, and Chihara, curious, wanted to know if it hurt when touched. Distracted, he said it didn't hurt anymore while the girl watched him with a sadistic look. She brought her hands to Kuroki's head to examine the wound more closely, and Kuroki blushed as he looked into the girl's eyes so closely while she also stared back at him intensely. Feeling awkward, the boy pushed Chihara away and asked if she was also in pain, breaking the tension that had built up. The girl replied yes, lowering her head as if a cat had denied her a little affection. Then they heard a noise in the hallway and were startled. The nurse entered the room informing Kuroki that she had already spoken with his math teacher. When she realized he was no longer there and assumed the boy had returned to the classroom, she kept wondering if she had passed by him. But in truth, the boy was hiding with Chihara on the bed behind the curtains. That was when the principal distracted the nurse, calling her to accompany him to the teacher's room. Meanwhile, Kuroki remained silent in front of Chihara, who was watching him from behind. Slowly, she lowered her mouth to the level of Kuroki's neck, and the boy was left speechless. But he simply whispered that his head hurt because of the bump that had formed. Clueless, the boy turned around and pressed the hematoma on the girl's head. Chihara snapped her fingers, and Kuroki imagined she wanted to return the pain as penance. He closed his eyes, waiting for his punishment, and she stared at him seriously. Suddenly, she grabbed his shoulders and violently pushed him backward. Kuroki fell sitting on the bed, wondering what the girl was going to do to him next. She opened the curtain to check if anyone was in the room as a witness, and simply left the bed, staring at Kuroki, who remained seated, watching her. Then, with a calm expression, Chihara wished Kuroki a good rest. The curtains closed, and the boy was confused to realize she was actually concerned about him. Kuroki looked at the pillow, but knew it would be hard to sleep since the girl's scent still lingered in the place, and at his age, that was a trigger. It was morning, and Chihara, with a bandage on her head, was brushing her teeth while still sleepy. She rinsed her mouth nicely, followed by a gargle to clean thoroughly. She buttoned her shirt and put on her sweater, getting ready for another routine day. Leaving home, she said she was heading to school, and a voice asked if she hadn't forgotten anything, to which the girl replied no, or rather, yes. While people moved normally through the train station, Something about Chihara caught the attention of those passing by her side, but the girl couldn't understand why so many judgmental stares. So she decided to look down to see if something was different about her and realized what was going on. She was wearing a pair of very eccentric shoes, which by the way seemed to bother those who crossed her path. Chihara felt invaded by so many stares and murmurs, not knowing what to do. She thought about going back to change them, but that would definitely make her late for school. So she thought of Chinatsu, imagining what advice the girl would give her, and clearly envisioned her friend telling her that everything would be fine. Thus, she decided not to worry and continued on her way normally. At school, a teacher greeted the arriving students, wishing them a good morning. But when Chihara passed by, something caught the woman's attention. Hearing her name, Chihara stopped and turned to the teacher, waiting to be scolded. The woman paused, wondering how to tell the girl that she couldn't wear something so flashy, but tried to understand her reason for doing so. Then unexpectedly, the teacher placed her hands on the girl's shoulders and said she understood everything. Chihara went to her locker and noticed that something else was different. She had picked up the wrong coat and figured she must have switched it while folding clothes in the laundry. Then nervously, she thought of Chinatsu telling her that even when things went wrong, she should remain confident. So she put on the flashy coat and headed without worries to gym class. But the excess of confidence didn't work out very well, and she was called during break to the principal's office, where she was instructed to write an apology letter as a warning. That's when her phone rang and she picked it up to check. Her father had sent her a message saying she had forgotten her lunch at home. Chihara put her hands in her pocket and realized she only had 3 coins. And under the circumstances, she was only able to buy 3 candies to line her stomach. This became another reason for gossip, but Chihara didn't seem to care, enjoying her tasty sweets. Perhaps her biggest concern was that she was still hungry, so she heard someone calling her. Kuroki was the only one brave enough at school to ask if she was going to eat only candies for lunch. And showing concern, he wanted to know if that kind of meal was enough for her. But without replying, she just stared at him. Then, seeking more openness, the boy asked if there was a reason behind her eating so poorly. But still getting no answer, the boy turned forward and apologized for the misunderstanding. That's when Kuroki took his rice ball and offered it to the girl. He explained that he had 2, and just one was enough to satisfy his hunger. Then he opened the rice ball's wrapper, telling her that his mom had made it with leftovers from dinner, and even though it was cold, it tasted good. Chihara widened her eyes, and Kuroki asked if she didn't like rice balls. But in fact, she loved them, and her eyes almost sparkled with emotion. Kuroki felt satisfied being able to share his meal with Chihara and smiled as he admired the girl eating. Then he turned to the front with such lightness that he even thought Chihara's shoes were super cool. When you're alone on the first day of school, it's nice to make friends with the person sitting next to you. But that person isn't just nice to you, they're nice to the whole school. Then you realize you have only one friend, but that friend has many. And thus begins the phenomenon, you are my only friend, but I am not your only friend. With that reflection, we begin the chapter where the teacher asks the students to form pairs. During English class, that's what the teacher requested, and Chihara immediately thought of Kuroki to accompany her in the task. However, when she tried to talk to him, she noticed the boy was chatting with other guys. Then Chihara felt like a lightning bolt had struck her, as she got no partner for the exercise. All the students were moving around to find their pairs, always ignoring Chihara as if she were a demonic aberration. Thus, Chihara remained isolated in her dense aura until Kuroki turned around to talk to her. He suggested the two of them do the assignment together, and that felt like a blow of flowers to Chihara's dignity. Kuroki then explained that he had gotten the task with the other guys but ended up being excluded. The girl felt so relieved that she couldn't even respond. So Kuroki apologized, thinking she might already have a partner, but quite eagerly she replied that she didn't have anyone and felt happy to work with him. Later, Kuroki was out on the street looking stylish with his crossbody fanny pack, reading a message from his family about which cake to buy for his little sister's birthday, when suddenly he saw Chihara walking around distracted. He kept thinking about what to do since it was the first time he'd seen her outside of school hours. The boy then involuntarily stepped away, pondering whether or not to go talk to her right there in front of him. But the idea that she might be waiting for someone made him give up. So Kuroki turned his back and went on his way to take care of his errands, but this time it was Chihara who noticed him nearby. She even called out to him but was interrupted by a man who asked for a moment of her attention. It was a photographer who asked permission to take some pictures of her, and Chihara, without answering, could only think of Kuroki. The photographer took her silence as a yes and asked the girl to pose while pointing the camera. Kuroki came out of the pastry shop carrying a box of profiteroles and by a twist of fate crossed paths with Chihara again, walking in the opposite direction. Certain that the girl was alone, Kuroki gathered the courage to greet her, but a noise from below stopped him. A little girl was crying, lost, and our boy couldn't ignore her. Chihara noticed and returned to see what was happening. Kuroki sat on the ground and tried to get information from the little girl to help find her mother. Chihara wanted to help, but something held her back. Her exotic and mysterious eyes usually triggered children to start crying even more. Then the girl spotted a specific store and had $1 million idea. Meanwhile, Kuroki kept trying to calm the crying girl who wouldn't stop. And suddenly, Chihara appeared behind Kuroki with a cute mask to hide her eyes and not scare the baby. The little girl stopped crying and asked if she was the adorable and cheerful girl, to which Chihara replied yes. Kuroki was left speechless, just watching the two talk about the character on the mask. The boy kept trying to understand what Chihara was doing, but it clearly worked because the little girls stopped crying, and they were chatting away. With the situation under control, the adorable cardboard girl informed them that there was a police post nearby. And while the two laughed and played, Kuroki realized Chihara had been observing him the whole time and decided to help him. Then the little girl's mother appeared and took her daughter away, relieved, while Kuroki thanked Chihara for helping solve the problem. Watching mother and daughter leave, Kuroki revealed that he didn't feel trustworthy. So Chihara took the adorable girl's mask and placed it on Kuroki's head. She looked deeply into Kuroki's eyes and said sincerely that he was a trustworthy person. Kuroki removed the mask and blushed upon realizing that she believed that. Then they decided to spend the rest of the day together, and Chihara mentioned she had visited a cat cafe, which to Kuroki didn't seem like news. It was lunchtime at school, and the students were leaving the classroom to enjoy their break. Kuroki looked to the side and saw that Chihara was still in the classroom opening her bag. Then the girl took out a lunchbox, and Kuroki found it curious since it was rare to see her stay in the room during lunch, the last time being when she ate sweets. Kuroki also knew that she usually stayed alone when not with Chinatsu, and so the two of them started opening their lunchboxes in the classroom. Seizing the opportunity, our protagonist invited the girl to have lunch together, and he chose the school rooftop to avoid curious looks. Even so, he asked if he was bothering her, as his self-esteem wasn't great, but the girl with chopsticks in hand didn't understand the question. So trying to comfort him, she decided to talk and said that the weather was nice. Nervous about the moment, Kuroki thought it was a good opportunity to say that he didn't have many friends and that he was happy she talked to him when they met on the street. He also mentioned that he'd like to return the favor when Chihara suddenly dropped her chopsticks. The object bounced and slipped down over the balcony. They only had time to watch the object flee and conclude that the chopsticks were gone forever. But Chihara didn't seem to mind and said she would eat anyway, and Kuroki was shocked to see that she would eat with her hands. So the boy decided to give her his chopsticks, as he hadn't used them yet. Chihara looked at Kuroki, thinking that maybe he didn't mind eating with his hands, but in reality, his intention was to use them after she finished. Concerned, Chihara warned Kuroki that when it was his turn, he'd have to eat quickly, but he said he was already used to it. Then Chihara had the idea that they could take turns eating and finish in time. Kuroki brought his hand to his mouth, taking the idea of an indirect kiss seriously. He even thought about flipping the chopsticks around, but that would definitely be rude to the girl. However, seeing her eat, he imagined she wouldn't mind as it was a respectful gesture on his part. Suddenly, Chihara took the chopsticks to Kuroki's lunchbox, and the boy didn't know how to react. He just watched her chew the piece she took from his plate, curious. And Chihara chewed for a while without much expression. In her mind, she imagined the boy would also take food from her plate, and that would seal a great friendship. But reality was different, and the girl only commented that she had failed at communicating. Chihara picked up a rice ball from her lunchbox, and the boy noticed how much brown food there was on the plate. She took the initiative and handed the chopsticks to the boy with a piece of tamagoyaki. Chihara confessed that the taste was strange because it was slightly sweet, and Kuroki revealed that his mother put sugar in mayonnaise as if it were a family specialty. Chihara then felt curious about how her own family made tamagoyaki and decided she would ask her father, and Kuroki became curious about the man cooking. The girl said that her father also made omuris when he was in a good mood, and Kuroki thought it was interesting to bring that typical dish to school. Then, in the middle of the conversation about family cooking, Chihara invited Kuroki to try a meal at her house. She looked at him with her red, intimidating eyes while the boy processed the information. Kuroki got nervous just thinking about entering Chihara's house, but he didn't want to be rude by refusing. So he started sweating cold, and with wide eyes, he impulsively responded that he didn't want to go. Chihara just widened her eyes while the boy tried to explain himself. After class inside Genki cafeteria, Chihara was staring at an omuris sign, wishing to eat her father's version, and coincidentally, that was his cafeteria. It was 7 in the morning, and Chinatsu entered Chihara's room full of energy. With a sparkle in her eye, the girl was sure she would have a lot of fun using Chihara for a makeover session. It was the day for makeup and trying on new clothes. The two toasted with energy drink cans and shoved them down. Chihara instantly felt the effect and asked if her friend was feeling okay. With pure vigor, the friend replied that everything was great. Chihara thought it was better to brush her teeth and wash her face before starting the girly activities while Chinatsu waited. When everything was ready, Chinatsu took out her magic suitcase and got to work. Chihara had on a facial mask and was supposed to leave that plaster on for 15